Okay. Got that out of the way.
Oh, good. Just do it the entire time.
Well, I have a sound effect I can just loop in the background when I'm editing.
Actually,
That's been through the Instagram cycle already, though. Like, it's no longer popular.
Right.
Yet
right.
that stupid song, the Oh No song, persists. I hate it. Just because she says oh no doesn't mean that you have to use it every time something goes wrong in an Instagram video. It's done. Next song.
But she says it 3 times. Like how else are you going to find 3 oh no's together like that?
I know. It seems like we'll get through it. Just stop using the stupid song. Okay.
Yeah.
Are you
good
ready?
now?
Yeah.
Okay.
Feel better.
Okay.
Feel better. As you know, this is the measure of an episode, where it is our continuing mission to explore what makes Star Trek genuine Star Trek, and not just genuine Star Trek from another show.
A non-sci-fi version of Back to the Future 2.
I'm Paul.
And I'm Jonathan. And we do this using 3 criteria. The first one is there sci-fi inherent to the plot? Not just a sci-fi setting, a la Back to the Future 1, but actually explored and discussed. Number 2, is that sci-fi presented in a unique or novel way? Which I think check. I've been trying to think of a show where they take a story that's known and they put a different character in. Because it's not quite It's a Wonderful Life, and it's not quite Back to the Future 2, where it's that same scene replayed. Like, there's a different person, so the outcome is different. And I can't think of another time where that's happened. So if you know one, I'd love to discuss it. And number 3, is there a moral or ethical dilemma placed in the episode? And I can't think if there was one.
Well, maybe we can dig it out.
Right, yeah, I'm sure we can parse it somewhere, yeah.
Right. And I'm Paul, and this week we watched Star Trek Strange New Worlds Season 1, Episode 10, Equality of Mercy.
Yeah.
Interesting. The blurb is, in the Season 1 finale, just as Captain Pike thinks he's figured out how to escape his fate, he's visited by his future self, who shows him the consequence of his actions. Only just now did I realize this is very... I can only think of Scrooged, but what's the actual... is it It's a Wonderful Life?
No.
A
Christmas yeah.
Christmas Carol. Yeah.
Christmas Carol, there we go, yeah.
Yeah, very much reads that way. So are we going to jump right in and just say it was yes or no Star Trek? I mean, here's the thing. Going back to what you were saying, I think that it's not a remake of the episode.
Right.
It's like an alternate reality of that episode.
Oh, 100%, that's what it is, yeah.
That you don't need to know. I mean, that's what you were saying about Back to the Future 2, right?
Yeah.
But you don't need to know. Like, I had never seen... What's the name of the episode? The original series?
Balance of Terror.
Episode? Yeah. I had never seen it. And even if I was a good podcasting host, I would have gone back and watched it. But I did not. But I did see the featurette on whatever, Paramount Plus, Amazon.
Okay.
And it showed kind of all of the different things that they were mirroring, I guess.
Okay.
And it was cool. I was like, oh, that did not come through. So I guess I would have had to have seen it. But I'm glad that I didn't, because I would have been looking for those things. Like, what's similar and what's different? And then it would have become a Where's Waldo of Star Trek episode.
Right. Yeah. Like, I don't think... I mean, I'm sure that there were some people, obviously some reviewers as well, went over it with a fine-tooth comb, trying to, like, watch scene by scene the comparisons. But Balance of Terror is such a great episode in and of itself that it has stuck with me. So when I was watching this, there were a couple scenes where I was like, this looks really familiar. And then there were a couple scenes where it was like, oh, this is such a great twist on that.
Yeah. And having seen it, it was nice to know. I mean, what made sense after realizing that it was a kind of, they were not aping, I don't know what to call it, that it was some sort of mirror universe, mirror continuation of Balance of Terror, was all of the quasi-hokey act breaks. because they did feel, even for this show, out of place.
So there's the one that everyone talks about, which I'm sure you saw, you figured out, whatever, where the camera zooms in on Spock.
Right.
It's right after they see the Romulans. What's funny about this, and I didn't go back and watch it, and I'm really sure it's not there, and I don't know if it was intentional or not. I have to believe it was, but they zoom in on Spock, and he raises his eyebrow, and a triangle dings the moment he raises his triangle or his eyebrow.
So he's holding the triangle.
Yeah. But it was just this great little button on that moment. Like the music was swelling, the camera zooms in. It's like, oh, this is totally paying homage to that scene, and then
Yeah, I kind of realized something was up when I saw those. I mean, and I think Pike gets his own one as well at a certain point. They do it twice.
Well, yeah. So
twice.
the first one they did with him was when he kind of circles the front of the console, and then like the camera kind of stays with him as he's at the far end, and he walks towards it, and then he kind of looks around, and then he goes back to his seat. And again, this is kind of like Trouble with Tribbles versus Trial and Tribulation, where they had that long pause in the scene where it was like the original series knew that DS9 was going to remake this, and so they needed that pause in there to have Jadzia Dax walk by in the background 60 years later or 30 years later. Kind of the same thing here, because like Kirk does this just leisurely pace around the front console and just kind of looks around, and it's like, what are you doing? Like, why are you establishing this shot of him just leisurely walking around when we're, halfway through for the first season? We don't need this establishing shot of the bridge. We know the bridge.
Yeah, I think that they were establishing where people were sitting, because everybody was in different locations, basically.
Oh, maybe,
So-
but it was like, again, shot exactly the same way in the same pauses of Kirk versus Pike, and so it was like the original series had Kirk do this, so Pike could do it in a confusing, like, okay, this is where this person is now, this is where this person is, like in this episode, it made sense for him to walk awkwardly around the bridge because he doesn't know where everyone is and he's just trying to get his bearings. But in the original series, it was like, why are you doing this? And it's like, oh, you did this because 60 years later, they're going to need you to have done that.
This is another reason why I'm glad I didn't watch, or I didn't know that it was going to be a redo, or whatever you want to call it, of Balance of Terror, because I would have just been looking for that.
Right.
We were just watching for that thing. And I think that's the wrong way to watch these types of episodes.
Absolutely. Yeah. This is right. This episode in particular, the better way to do it is to watch this episode, and then, any Star Trek fan who is slightly better than we are, not to the point where they like know this episode like the back of their hand, because then you're right, you're going over it with a fine-tooth comb, but fine-tooth comb.
A fine comb tooth.
Right. Man, look at that tooth. It is so anyway.
Fine.
Right. I just no, when you do your hair well done, like you just look so not put together, but there's another word, like not coiffed, but anyway.
Solid joke.
Thanks. Yeah.
So
it's getting hot in the garage and it's like not even 7:00 yet. This sucks. So, not like the major nerds who know the episode backwards and forwards, but the ones who recognize these scenes and the episode knowing, oh, this is Balance of Terror. Like it's this, the way you should watch it is this one first and then Balance of Terror, just to see like all the scenes that were copied and remind yourself of how Kirk played it out versus what Pike did, which I also take beef with.
We've talked about this before. When this show first premiered, whenever they would do sort of a winky wink at the audience, it wasn't done in a Picard type of way where needed to be, number one, underscored by music.
Right.
The entire scene needed to stop.
Yep.
And it needed to be acknowledged by every single person.
Yeah. And reiterated, and as you know.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
And they don't do this in this show, which is great.
Yes.
And so that's how they approached this particular kind of episode. Because if you think about when they've done this before, as you said in DS9, where they kind of tongue-in-cheek did a Tribbles episode where they go back in time and they interact with the original series crew. And it's not really a great episode. It's just kind of a fun episode.
Right.
And this was not that,
No.
right? They did it in such a way, in the perfect way. So hats off to the writers.
Yes.
Because I was able to watch it knowing nothing about Balance of Terror and still enjoy the episode and still not feel like, am I missing something? Like what's going on? Kind of like how I feel when I watch Lord of the Rings.
Sure.
Like, am I missing something?
Right.
Who is that?
Right. Well, yeah, and even I would imagine, I don't know if you've read the Harry Potter books, but even the Harry Potter movies, there are things that happen because they need to happen because the book showed more, but they glossed over it in the movie. And so if you don't know, the movies are for the book fans. They're not to bring in people who don't know Harry Potter.
To me, the first 2 Harry Potter books were very much that. They were very much just for fans of the books.
Right.
It's like, oh, there's that. Oh, there's that I remember. There's that I remember. And it wasn't until they brought in Alphonse Cuarón to direct the 3rd one.
Right.
And it was just like, oh, this is a real movie now. Now it's actually like, you could probably watch this and get something out of it.
Sure.
If you hadn't read the books. How do we get there? Yeah. So this is a great episode for that reason.
Right.
And for me, I mean, I other than the really hammy act outs, and the music, I think the music is what tipped me off the most, because even in the non-act outs, the rest of the show, the music was like tipped over it was like kind of leaning toward the campy, the way that they would score the original series.
Right.
Which was very overt, aggressive. Even the sound of the music was very, the types of instruments they would use. I don't know if you remember, but when Pike walks into the future Enterprise bridge, they're using woodwind, like low woodwind, something you would never hear in a modern television show.
Oh, okay.
And,
yeah.
And it just felt very like, oh, they're definitely paying homage without calling attention to it, I guess. So I came through to the end of it being, this is a good season 1 closer. Remember what we were talking about? Well, not with you, but...
No, that was me. I just...
Oh, that was you? Oh, wow. Awkward.
No, it was either somebody you pulled off the street or your sister.
Only one of those 2 things.
Yeah.
We were talking about how could they possibly have a season closer after they had a season closer in episode 9 where
Right.
everything gets wrapped up. It's like, oh, this is how they did that.
Yeah.
Or so. Well, first things first.
Okay.
Jonathan, we talked about, I promised everyone that we would go through it, each and every comment on Amazon and talk about all the bad comments that people leave. And I thought there were going to be some really interesting things to say about it, some really heartfelt, perhaps constructive criticism
Right.
for the show.
Yeah.
In the 1 stars, as is most 1-star reviews anywhere else on the internet.
Of course. Yes. Most people leave a well thought out, articulated criticism when they leave 1-star reviews.
Right. No long series of exclamation points
Right.
and misspellings.
Yeah.
So I read through many of them. I did not read through all of them. Most of them, though, are everyone complaining that it is too woke for Star Trek.
Yeah.
If you were to search woke, that would be the number 1 word used in all of the reviews. Mm-hmm. It was crazy.
Yeah.
And the irony of everyone saying this, what happened to Star Trek? It's too woke now. Everyone's trying to do another thing. Kind of a subset of that was there are too many women on the bridge. Where are all the men? By female reviewers, by the way.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Yeah. I think a couple of male ones had the balls to say too many females on the bridge. Who's doing the laundry?
Right.
But what's interesting to me, the irony of that is that that's Star Trek's thing.
Right.
Star Trek is woke.
Yeah.
I hate when people use that word derogatorily too. I think it's so dumb. I think those people don't realize what they're doing when they say that. I would also argue that I don't think they could probably define it.
Right. Oh, no.
What woke means.
Yeah.
But yeah, most of them are complaining it's too woke. There's too much diversity. And that's what Star Trek has always been.
Right. Exactly.
That's its thing.
Right.
There was a couple about Pike's hair. They think he looks like a cartoon character.
Uh-huh.
And they've got a point.
Yeah.
They've got a point.
They're not wrong. Yeah.
Yeah, they're not wrong. But we like that.
Yep.
But that's basically it. I thought there was going to be some way out there things, specifics, but it's all just that. It's all just...
Right. It's just crybaby ranting. And you're so right. Like even the very, very first unaired pilot had a female as the second in command. And the thing,
Yeah, it's unheard of. I
Right.
mean, that's the wokeness of Star Trek.
yeah,
Yeah, it is interesting. And maybe this has something to do with why Star Trek has such longevity. That it manages to maintain quality
right.
for the most part. And it also manages to maintain some contention, some cultural contention that kind of keeps perking its head up, you know?
Yeah, well, and that's for me personally, it's one of the things that does make Star Trek so great. It's it's kind of in our third criteria when we talk about the moral or ethical dilemma, because I do feel like that's usually the issue that is trying to reflect upon the world. But sometimes it's not. Sometimes it is just that. There is a scene where they kind of accept that a black woman in the 60s has this high-ranking position and nobody bats an eye at it.
Yeah, so I don't understand these people who think, I mean, I guess I've never understood this idea. Like there were a couple of comments where they were complaining about the first episode, how Spock is on a date and proposes, and then they look like they're going to have sex, and they say, well, Vulcans don't do that.
Right.
That's not how Vulcans work. It's just Ponfar, and then that's it.
Right. Which we have already discussed can't be the case.
Can't be the case, number one. Number two, how do you know?
Well,
Like this is there's no book about this stuff. Maybe there is, but
one or two. But here's
probably is.
here's the thing. It isn't canon until it is. And so for these people, if it isn't canon, it's impossible to be. And we've been living with classic Trek for 15 years now. For 15 years up until Discovery. And people kind of got set into either their own headcanon or what had already been established, and nothing could be added to that. And so whenever any of these new shows has been adding to it, these people are like, no, you can't do that. That's not Star Trek. And it's like, well, yes, it is, because that's what, well, first off, it's in the title. And second off, like that's what the writers have deemed it to be. And now if it's contradictory, you can kind of make up headcanon to make it make sense. But, Vulcans having sex outside of Ponfar, yes, that is canon because we saw it happen.
Right. I mean, it's the unending paradox of when they reboot something that is many years old, right? Where if you do the same thing, people complain that, well, this is just the same thing. And if you do something different, people are like, well, this is not the same thing. And
The Force Awakens versus The Last Jedi?
yeah, yes. Although, again, just because it's different doesn't make it good. Also has to be different and good,
Right.
right?
Well, and just because it's different doesn't mean it's bad.
No,
You don't have
exactly.
to hate something just because it's different.
No, that's right. I mean, but
That's kind of the whole
unending
point of Star
paradox.
Trek.
Well, and I like that they did it because they did it and they didn't do it just because it's different. They did it and they made it work in the course of the show.
Man, did they
Right?
make it work? Yeah.
Yeah, it's. I mean, with the exception of a couple of episodes, this is like the best thing that's ever happened to Star Trek. I'm going to say it again, and I'm going to keep saying it because it's just as good, in my opinion, as Next Gen so far.
Yeah.
If you think about Next Gen Season 1 and Strange New Worlds Season 1, who's winning?
Oh, Strange New Worlds by a
Right.
landslide. Yeah.
And I don't mind the kind of, we're letting our hair down episodes.
Are you talking about like Spock Amok?
No, that one was fine.
Okay.
I like that one. It was the fantasy Nebula one.
Oh,
Not
right,
like-
right. The Elysian Kingdom. I don't know if we talked about that or not, but I actually have to change my opinion on the episode. It was fine for what it was, but I read somebody else's analysis of it, and talking about how Elysian actually means like heavenly or whatever. And so it's an analogy for letting his daughter go, like letting her die. The episode basically is the heavenly kingdom, and he's letting her go into this thing that he doesn't know. He's just taking a leap of faith that she's going to be okay. And then she comes back, kind of just a picture of her later, which happens to a lot of people who lost their loved ones. They do have dreams about them, either coming back or just being there, and they get to talk with them again. And her saying, I'm okay. And so him like getting that closure of letting his daughter die. Whether or not that was intentional, it's such a great read on the episode that I am happy to take that episode for what it is. Just him like kind of having the memories with her and going through the internal struggles of trying to keep her alive and realizing that he needs to let her go.
Wait, so is is the idea that she's just died, and this is the fantasy is kind of all on his head type of thing.
No.
She just died in the Did she actually go into the nebula?
Yeah, she actually went into the nebula. Like it's just a Star Trek version of that kind of process.
Okay, but to me, it would seem like the message would land so much better if the execution of that message was better. The outcome does not change the journey of getting to the outcome. I feel like the journey was not as good.
Sure.
It just didn't land. It just wasn't as interesting.
Right. Yeah, that's fair.
But we already talked about that episode.
We did. Yeah, we're not talking about that episode. We're talking about
I want
the
to hear.
quality of mercy.
I want to hear. Pull back the curtain just a second. Just a second. What did you think of the horror sci-fi homage?
Well, this is getting cut out. I haven't watched it yet.
Dude, is it getting cut out? This is your punishment.
I'm just saying, like, I've got nothing to add to that. So you're gonna ask me, hey, what'd you think of it? I don't know.
All right, curtain back.
I do want to say one of the things that probably the most frustrating thing about this episode is its title versus the story. Because kind of what you were talking about, like if you don't know that it relates to the balance of terror, calling it the quality of mercy and then having Pike show mercy to the Romulans and essentially not only get his ass handed to him, but start a war. It's like mercy is not the way to go. You chose wrong. And obviously that's not the message that they intended, but with the episode being called the quality of mercy and mercy failing, it seemed like that's the message that is unintentionally being delivered. It's a quote from Shakespeare. So the full quote is the quality of mercy is not strained. It droppeth as the gentle rain from heaven upon the place beneath. It is twice blessed. It blesseth him that gives and him that takes.
Yeah, it seems more in relation to him giving himself up, him trading places with Spock, to me, than it does. I mean, it applies to both.
Right.
It applies to both
Mm-hmm.
situations.
Yeah. So seeing it as the personal story rather than the main story, that makes a lot more sense.
Maybe, I don't know.
No,
Again,
you're probably right, because he's offering.
He's sacrificing himself.
Yeah, he's sacrificing himself. He's not giving
Spock
Spock a reprieve, right? Like he's like, I'm not going to force you to die. I'm going to die as was originally intended instead. You're welcome. Like,
okay, so let's jump ahead. I have a few things to say about the whole war thing. So at the beginning of the show, not the beginning, but when they encounter the Romulans, and they say, we've been at war for 100 years.
yeah,
Why don't we take a break and visit each other? We've never even seen ourselves face to face.
right.
And then the big climax at the end of the show, when the shit hits the fan.
Right.
The inciting incident of the climax is they've just declared war on the Federation.
Yeah.
I was thinking, weren't they already at war for 100 years? And even if they hadn't officially declared war, we were already at war. When you're fighting for 100 years, we're going to go ahead and call that a war, right?
Okay.
So I didn't quite understand why that was the moment that everything changes.
Right. That's a good point. So it's less like they've been at war, but it's more been a war of that's your side, this is my side, don't cross it. Like there's no free pass for either Romulans or the Federation. And the Romulans are now saying, like, we are there is no neutral zone anymore. Like this is a battlefield and we are going to attack.
Okay. Well,
but you're right. Like he
Fine.
says, we've been at, does he say we've been at war or does he say we've been fighting? Because
whatever. I mean, it seems like if you've been fighting for 100 years that you can go ahead and call it a war, right?
Right.
When he says fighting, you don't think that, there's a neutral zone and that there is contention.
right.
That you think of there being battles between ships and outposts, etc.
Yeah. I mean, it's basically a Cold War is what it is.
Right.
The threat is there, but nobody's doing anything about it.
So it occurred to me that they say in this episode, we've never seen Romulans. We don't know what they look like. And there's that whole moment between the person who drives the ship, whose name I do not know,
Right.
and how she confronts Spock about like, do you have something to say? That kind of thing.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. Again, keep that just a quick tangent. Like keeping my foot above the gas. How long has it been since they've used gas in their vehicles? Like, do you?
Well, it's like a colloquialism,
Right.
They,
Oh, I know
she
that.
probably doesn't know what that means either.
Oh, I guess that's true. Right. Like,
Yeah.
like roll down the window or hang up the phone. Those are not things we
Or
do anymore.
Drive the ship, because you know what, Jonathan?
They don't. It's the job for somebody who's completely incompetent, so it makes them feel like they have something to do. That console is worthless.
Yeah, it's connected to nothing. It's a light bright.
I'm flying the ship. Yes, you are. Good job.
Yeah. Anyway, so they've never seen the Romulans, and I was thinking, how do they even know about Romulans? And the only thing I think of was that episode of Enterprise that we watched, the most recent one that we just talked about last week.
Booby trap. Oh wait,
Yeah, no.
I know it was called Minefield, right? But yeah, we said it was going to be booby trap, and then we lied.
Was that the only one?
And then that's the only one that we've seen. There's another episode either later. I mean, there's another episode in Enterprise. Who knows if it's before or after that? Where the audience sees the Romulans, but the Archer and friends do not see anything about them. That was the only episode where they actually had vocal contact with the Romulans. Beyond that, Balance of Terror was the next time that they were seen.
I just didn't know if the writers of Strange New Worlds were savvy enough to know about that episode, or just Enterprise episodes in general. I don't know if it's kind of the black sheep.
I mean, it is, but there were a couple winks and nods in Picard. But they must have done something with the Romulans. Oh, I wonder if it's a tangential agreement. The Vulcans have that treaty with the Romulans, and because the Vulcans met with the humans, the Vulcans are like, and the Romulans you kind of want to stay away from. Like, they're completely combative and contradictory, and just they will want to fight you rather than talk to you. And so the humans were just like, oh, okay, yeah, let's avoid them. Because Enterprise takes place 70 years before the original series, and the original series says they've been at war for 100 years. So it must have happened 30 years before that, which I think is the same time as First Contact-ish. So that's got to be what happened, that the Vulcans just said, and this is everything the light touches.
Yeah, and even Spock says in this episode, if Romulans and Vulcans are related somehow, then we need to be careful. He makes a bunch of logic jumps, and I guess he's the character to do that seem impossible,
right?
To the right answer. He does that twice.
Yeah.
Like the whole idea where he jumps around to, they must be related to Vulcans, and our Vulcans' history is that we have a very barbaric past, and he even makes a little dig at humans, even by human standards.
Right.
It's like, oh, snap. And he just brushes by it, and nobody cares because he does it all the time.
Yeah,
and then
he's a dick.
He says, well, in that way, we need to make sure that we don't show weakness because it could be catastrophic. And he's totally right. Like, it's like, wow, that was a really good logic jump. It's like, you got us up to speed really fast. He does that again when he's talking about at the end with in like one of the best scenes in Star Trek alone, where at the very end, Spock is back. He's back in his original timeline. And he says, good to see you. And him just saying, good to see you, he's able to reason and logic his way into, I must be dead in the future and you gave yourself up for me, so I appreciate that. Thank you. You're very important to me.
I mean, there was a little bit of dialogue between those things, but yes.
But that's the correct, that's the amount of information he had, and he gets to the end of it with all the right information.
It's good to see you. Oh my God, did I die in an alternate future?
Thank you.
Right.
But not because you're happy to see me.
Sorry, that's where it goes. Yeah. It's good to see you. Oh.
I'm alive!
I cannot thank you enough.
Yeah, I know. So anyway, but I'm not kidding. Like, I got a little misty-eyed. I was like, oh, they earned that.
Right.
That's actually a scene they earned.
Yeah.
When they try and get sentimental in Star Trek, usually they don't earn it.
Right.
Or they just avoid it and they brush over it.
Yeah. Yeah. We scheduled this a little bit too soon. I thought about it last night / this morning. I wanted to go back to, I think it's called The Menagerie, which is the episode where Pike comes back in the wheelchair and Spock talks about how he's going to defend these events that happened or something. And I think he says, I owe him a debt of gratitude in that episode. And I think that, they were like, not only did this episode show like why he has to go in the chair, but it also explained why Spock owes him so much.
Right. I wonder if was the impetus of this episode. Spock saying that.
Right.
And boy, do they handle it for Pike. They say, we tried every single other timeline. Every one. And you always have to suffer and die. Like, sorry.
It's like the Doctor Strange scene, he's sitting through all the different timelines and, and he's like, yeah, I survive about 2/3 of them, but somebody else dies in the process. So you have to die in quotes.
Right.
But what I think is going to happen, and maybe they're not going to take it this far. Maybe it is going to have this dark ending. But I think he's going to end up in the wheelchair. I think that somehow the aliens from like episode 4 or something, the ones that were able to cure the doctor's daughter, she is going to come back and say, like, we have changed planets, so we still have the technology, but we don't have that sacrifice. We're kind of idiots for not thinking of that sooner. Come join us and we can make you better. I think that
would be nice.
Yeah, I think that somehow he is going to get his happy ending, whether it's that way or another way. But I think that he will be in the wheelchair and be miserable for long enough for that episode to happen, and then it will go back to him, and and he will be better.
Maybe. I feel like they're going to think of some crazy clever way, because remember, this happens in 7 years,
right?
From now, or 6.5 years. Or am I getting that wrong? I don't know how far in the future they send him.
Right. Some of the timeline seems to be a little wonky, because he also says it takes place 10 years later, and they jump 7 years into the future for this episode, and Spock says it happened 6 months ago. So there's either a time jump that happened that we as an audience are not aware of, or there's a genuine continuity error between the 10 versus 7.
Yeah, I mean, it could be that they've been in space for 3 years or
right.
2.5 years.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
I guess we'll find out. I mean, I don't think they're going to. This is not going to happen until the end. Although it would be ballsy if they jumped ahead and handled this in season 2 or 3.
Well, everyone before this episode aired was really worried that the images of Kirk were because they were going to do a baton handoff, and the rest of Strange New Worlds was going to be about Kirk instead. And I'm really glad that at least so far they haven't done that.
His hair is way too hypnotic,
right,
for them to do that.
Right.
There's no way that they would get rid of Pike at this point. Everybody loves him,
Right.
Okay, I have a couple of things.
Okay.
I want to talk about.
Right.
First thing,
okay.
It's very, very important, because we've talked about this before. So we were wondering.
Oh my God, we have to hurry up. We're going to pass
out. Pike cracks an egg into his pasta at the beginning.
Yes,
right?
Pasta mama.
And he shaves some Parmesan on top.
Yep.
What's going on here? Where are they getting these eggs? I want to know now, because when you crack an egg, I thought maybe when you have eggs, you can like print them or synthesize them in such a way where you wouldn't have to be picking them up somewhere or have an egg farm.
Right.
So this is just another episode of what are they eating?
Well,
what is that?
Right. It's Coluvian eggs from Goldar 5. Like,
oh, okay. Who's making up the names of these places?
Well, me, from apparently Mighty Morphin Power Rangers.
Well, they got to be from somewhere,
right? That's true. Got to nuke something.
Okay, another thing. Unless you have something to say about that, because I'm sure you've said it already.
Yeah, no, I mean, I can explain it away, but yeah. Well, they even did talk about it. Like they've something about picking up supplies somewhere. Anyway, but yeah.
Picking up supplies is not. We got a new shipment of eggs.
It's groceries.
They go bad.
No, in the future they do have a way of keeping things preserved and fresh for indefinitely. They must.
Or it's not really an egg. It's something else.
Right.
Like they can make them somehow.
Yeah.
Anyway, another little detail I love this stuff, is that when we cut to Uhura, when she's on the bridge, we can hear slightly, like just barely, the comms chatter through her earpiece.
Yes.
It's like barely there. And like, you're like, what? I was like, is somebody talking? Who's that? No, it's like, no, it's from the show.
Right.
We can hear what's coming. She hasn't turned up all the way, apparently. She's deaf in that ear.
Well, she's deaf because, that's where she listens. And so, like, there's so many messages that come through that are like, they're yelling into the microphone. Just, ow, God.
Yeah, then the feedback happens when she pulls it out. Yeah. Next detail that I loved.
Yeah.
When they're brainstorming, or rather Spock is brainstorming how to track the Romulans.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
That is like peak Star Trek.
That's true.
Because it's great. Because number one, it's them doing sciencey stuff.
Yep.
Right? And they're kind of working through it. It's like, what do you mean, Spock? It's like, well, if we can take this. And then not only is it that, it's real. Like what they say and how they do it is like real shit.
Right.
It's how we look at stuff in the universe now. And these lensing, like gravitational lensing, micro lensing, I think they called it. It's like, that's real stuff.
Yeah.
They thought about it. It was great.
I'm so mad at you.
Why?
Well, let's just keep going.
Oh, because you're about to sweat your balls off?
No, like I've got something to say about that, but yeah. Okay, go.
Okay. Well, say it.
No, let's finish up.
No.
I mean,
oh, you mean you're not on the show?
No. Yeah, yes, I want to tell you, but I'm going to wait for the right moment, and I promise I will remember because I'm so mad at you about it.
Okay. Well, next thing.
Okay. Okay.
Why would the Romulans destroy one of their warships to execute its crew? Why wouldn't they just beam them into space? Like that thing probably costs money,
Right.
and time, and now they're like one less ship because they wanted to execute the guy. It's like,
it's so effective, but what an amazing thing to do! Just like,
not as it's kind of anticlimactic.
it totally is, but I feel like, I mean, first off, maybe the idea is both for a show to the rest of the fleet. Like we are willing to destroy property to prove our point.
Right, but now there's 6 months to a year, possibly more, if they're going to build another ship.
Right.
And they just started a war.
Right. Yeah. And also, yes, the destruction of the ship to show how serious they are, but also just beaming him out into space. Nobody's going to see that.
That's true. Maybe they could like put it on the Instacam or whatever they call it. They don't have Instagram anymore. It's just Instacam.
Right.
Show a video of it. I do like that was one of the cruxes of that whole interaction between the lady Romulan and Pike.
She's like,
did you see what he did? He's like, no, well, I got a video of it here. I'm going to send it over. I'm going to Instagram it to you.
Right. Yeah.
And she just watches it. She's like, oh yeah, that. I've seen that one.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. What else? What else is a little thing? So another thing, the last interaction between old Pike and young Pike. By the way, I feel like that the way they did old man Pike stuff, he was like 10 years, maybe 13, 14, 15 years older.
Yeah.
It must have been digital. I did not see any, I couldn't quite tell how he was older, but I could tell he was older.
Right.
Maybe it was the hair was more gray or something, but it's some sort of digital aging thing, right? It's got to be because it looked too good. But a couple of interactions. The first thing that he says, he's apparently been through all timelines with the Vulcans or something like that.
Right.
Or where, because he says all the timelines you have to die. Sorry. But he also says the way that we can reunify or unify the Vulcans and the Romulans is in a sickbay cot, whatever he says. I was like, that is the most subtle reference you could possibly do, and I love it. Because it's a reference to the Next Gen episode Reunification.
Yes.
That Spock is in.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And they didn't, again, no musical cue.
Right.
Like the crew didn't come rushing in and like do the balloons thing,
Or even younger Pike being like, wait, how?
Right. And then there's an explanation for it.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like, it was great. To keep doing that. That was so awesome.
Right. Well, and if you don't know, it's just him giving a quick explanation as to why he's important.
Right. It still functions in the show.
Yeah.
It's not just a decal.
Right.
And the oh yeah moment where he's about to send them both back to wherever their original timelines. And then Kirk, the doorbell rings and he's like, oh yeah. And he like smiles and flips closed the time crystal box. And I thought that was such a great little moment that wasn't, they did not telegraph it. They did not dwell on it. It's just like, oh, I remember this. This is a fun little thing. And that's like good writing.
Yep.
Right? It would be good in any show.
Well, that specifically is good direction.
Yeah, it's a good melding of the two.
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah.
And then they play the "We're Making Memories" song.
Right.
I do think it's a bit glib that every other timeline, that basically Pike has to die in order for the universe to be right. I think it's slightly too simple.
Right. I mean, I think it could have been, like, yes, someone has to suffer. And it's almost always Spock. You could make it someone else, but you are choosing someone else over you. And that's not Pike.
Yeah. It's more of a character realization
Right.
than it is a reality, because
Well, yeah, he
they can
kind
figure it
of
out.
says that someone has to pay the price, and Pike is kind of like, okay, well, he didn't say this, but like you said, it's a character thing of like he would not put it off on someone else just so he didn't have to suffer.
Yeah, I get why they did it. I feel like they're going to figure it out. I don't think they're going to just condemn him to suffering.
Right.
know?
Mm-hmm.
I just can't imagine. But that's what's great about the show, is that we don't know. They might do that. They've now established in this episode that you're just going to have to suffer.
Right.
That's the way it's going to be.
Well, and it's also so nice that, yes, this was a series story arc, but there wasn't a spotlight on it in every episode. And now here we are at the end of the first season, and we're like, okay, we're done worrying about that. He may have something come up later that might help him, but he's accepted this situation in his life. We don't need to have those conversations about it anymore.
Yep. I make a prediction. Old Pike might come back, and I think that the Doctor's daughter will come back
Nice.
in some way.
Right. I think the Doctor's daughter will come back. Yeah, I agree with that. So just a couple casting things. I wish that I saw this online again, and I was like, man, that would have been so great. On Discovery, they had an actor play Sarek, Spock, and Michael's dad. And in the original series, that actor played the Romulan on Balance of Terror. And it would have been so great if they had that actor who played Spock's dad also play the Romulan on the Romulan ship in Quality of Mercy.
Wouldn't he be like 150 years old at this point, though?
No, the one from Discovery.
Oh, got it. Yeah.
And then kind of the same thing. Like I am really watching it a second time. It was fine, but there's not really anything that draws me to Paul Wesley as Kirk.
I honestly didn't like him. I didn't like that he seemed a bit too ambitious. He seemed very ambitious and myopic about how he thinks things. I mean, he has a lot of good points throughout the show, but they're all kind of like, you should have shot him, and this is why.
Right.
Like, it felt like he was trying to take over.
Right. Well, and but having said that, the other part that I did like about it was that they did talk as captains, and like Kirk never said you're wrong. He said he said something. You were showing mercy, which is always means you're going to hold your temper your punches, and and he's like, yeah, but you're standing on my ship and yours is destroyed, and he's like, all right, that's fair. So it was nice that neither of them just flat out said, your way is wrong. They were both like, this is how I would have handled it.
Yeah, I mean, they kind of do. They kind of, through example, he says, if you had just done this, we wouldn't be in this situation. That's basically saying you're wrong. And then Pike says, well, I'm standing here on an intact ship, and yours is in flames right now.
Right, but he gives that concession. He's like, oh yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah.
Like originally he said you're wrong, but then Pike's like, here's why I'm not. You're literally in it.
Well, again, we've talked about this before, how in terms of the ethical dilemma, that it's not just one-sided, where you obviously have to side with one side of the argument. It's like there is no good side. There's just two differing points of view.
Right.
And they explore those two things.
Yeah.
And I don't think in any of those exchanges between Pike and Kirk does any one of them come out on the right.
Right. We only know that Kirk is right because of Balance of Terror. And, and that's more just how the cards fall rather than it was the right thing to do.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So why were you mad at me?
So great episode, right? We're in agreement of that?
Yeah.
I was so focused on the time stones and how there's no explanation for them that I wanted to say that this was not proper Star Trek, just because, I wanted to like re-emphasize the fact that we loved this episode, but it's not proper Star Trek. But then you had to go and talk about that scene where they do like specific sci-fi explanations. I mean, yeah, sci-fi explanations of how they're going to catch that ship. And all we say is it doesn't matter where, it just has to be in the plot. And there it is in the plot.
Well, there's also, in that last conversation between Pike and Pike, that they do talk about, it's not just this is the way it shall be and how it always has been and this is what you have to do. It's not that kind of language. It's like, no, I've went through every single
Yeah, but that's using
causality.
time travel without explaining the time travel. So that's not sci-fi.
Yeah, but it's like it's as if you had a magical sci-fi device, but you or a magical time travel device,
Right.
and used it for sci-fi, right? He talks about all of the different causalities and where all the different timelines go and how they said this has to happen this way.
Nah.
We tried it. You know what I mean? Like to me, that's also another expression of science fiction.
No, because
I mean,
he's jumping through with a time stone. There's no sci-fi in the time stone.
well, we don't know how they work.
I mean, I guess that's true, but they don't explain it, which is the whole point of the explanation or exploration of it. There's no exploration of the time stone to get the time travel. He's just tapping it, like changing channels.
Jonathan, just because you can't understand, you're not smart enough to understand how the time crystals work. I can't do all the work for you.
I want to say something, but I can't.
Not in front of the rabbit. So yes, I think this is a proper Star Trek episode.
It is. It is. I'm glad to say that, but I'm also super mad to say that just for the reasons I stated.
You thought you had your hipster point of view, didn't you?
Well, yeah, that, and also, again, just to reiterate, like, we can love an episode and have it not be proper Star Trek. I really think the Balance of Terror is not proper Star Trek. We haven't watched it yet. I'm excited to get to it now. But based on this episode, I don't think they have that same explanation. And so I don't think that that would be the only sci-fi part. And if that part isn't in it, then it's just a great cat and mouse episode.
Yeah, you're right.
So
They handle a lot of stuff, though. They do a lot of sci-fi stuff, in my opinion. And it's like peripheral. I mean, I would think that you could argue that the science fiction is not really stapled into the plot. You know, it's kind of like things that happen in this. But I think that's enough.
nope, you have specifically said that's not enough.
I think it's enough for this episode, is what I'm saying.
But it either is or it isn't. But again, you've established that there is that specific scene where they talk about how to catch him, and there's two different proposals, and both of them are sci-fi. So it stands.
Well, I was also like confused as to what happens, like how when they finally get to the comet and they're waiting for the cloaked ship to go through the comet so they can look at it, and it just kind of appears elsewhere. I wasn't sure if it was a Romulan gambit of some kind or if it was just a mistake, if they didn't quite know where it was coming from. It was unclear to me how, like, what happened. They never really explained it, or at least I missed it.
No, they never explained it. Yeah, and I don't know. I was wondering the same thing. I don't know. Like I assumed that it did turn on its sensors long enough to see that there were two ships and decided to flank one of them.
Right. Or they were wrong that all their sensors are off when they're closed.
That's true. Yeah. Yeah. It was never explained. So, there obviously are a couple different ways it could have happened.
Great show. Great first season.
Great
Congratulations.
first season. Yep. I mean, I don't think there's any other series that has this high of a percentage of quality episodes. They really took their time and got to the meat and potatoes and the point of the episodes to really bring in some quality stuff.
Although I still say that Una, number one, not a necessary character. Everything that she says in this episode could have been said by somebody else.
Una?
It's Una.
She didn't say anything. She only said something at the beginning.
Well, I know exactly. Everything she says is forgettable. She has a couple lines and they could be given to another character.
All right, fair enough.
I feel like the only reason she's in the show is so she can get taken away at the end.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. I mean, but this also happens where some of the side characters really have their time to shine in later seasons. So maybe that'll happen.
Yeah. Or maybe this is their way of getting her off the show. And Pike doesn't do anything to help her. He's just like, yeah, well, you do what you do. You make the decisions. This is the consequences.
That'd be funny.
All right. Well, what are we watching next?
I think we're watching Booby Trap. Yeah.
All right. We're supposed to be watching that before.
Yeah.
And then we watched Minefield.
Yep. So let's watch Booby Trap and we'll get back on track.
Okay.
So
Get back on Booby Trap. I've been Paul.
I've been Jonathan.
And this has been The Measure of an Episode.
But you already knew that.
To guess who that is?
Yep. Sorry, let me do it. Let me do a
is that
different one.
Picard?
Let me do a different one.
Ah, yes. Okay. I get it now. You're the Gorn.